Take 3. First take. I had the camera around the wrong way, so it started recording a bag of fucking potatoes. Second take. I realized my phone had no space, and I had been speaking for like 6 minutes, and it only recorded like 50 seconds of that. I am one with technology. Third take. Okay, so I'm doing a vlog today. I'm going to do some writing today. I have prepped with some oat milk. I'm going to make a coffee. What am I doing? Fuck, I'm a dumbass. Also, can I just say, represent. And Danny was done wrong, and everyone needs to acknowledge it. So I decided, instead of writing for a little bit, I accidentally went and decided to make brownies. They are vegan brownies, and hopefully they turn out. So I learned the issue was that I spread out the brownies too thin over way too large of a tin, and essentially what the problem was is that the packet mix didn't take into account that I was an idiot. So yeah, my brownies are basically just charcoal. Okay, so I decided not to do a video of me writing, and it was literally just me sitting there like typing away, or it was just me thinking about typing away, which is just me achieving nothing. So I'm going to do a video instead. I'm going to focus on books that are really helpful for when you are writing, and how these writing books, how they can help give proper advice and all that sort of stuff. Sorry if my voice is kind of funny. I had 2 wisdom teeth out. Oh God, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 books. Okay, I'm going to go through them all, kind of tell you a little bit about them, and hopefully that will give some people some ideas on which books they might actually enjoy, and others which they will not enjoy and will not want to read, because that's what I'm all about. Okay. This first book is Writing Tools. It is 50 Essential Strategies for Every Writer. It's by Roy Peter Clark. Okay, it is incredible because it switches from the general to specific, which is only really helpful if you're getting into the editing phase of writing a novel. It can be helpful during the writing itself, but I feel like it's directly targeted for like later drafts, or you'll end up circling like the same draft for years like I have. Say something, I'm giving up on you. It has a contents page, which is, I know that should be expected, but it's still amazing. So this details every single strategy in the book. Okay, so you don't need to read the whole book to get something out of it. If you find a particular page for a strategy you are struggling with, like narration or voice or whatever, then you can read the chapter and then return to your writing without having to read 400 pages of shit to find one cheap bit of wisdom. And if you're lazy like me, it's a bit of a godsend. The book is split into 4 parts or strategies. So the first one is like nuts and bolts, which are like the basics and fundamentals. Part 2 is like special effects, or using your words for a particular purpose. Part 3 is like blueprints, which to me felt like structural help and strategies for different scenes that you might get stuck on. The last part is literally what they claim to be, which is useful habits, like limiting self-criticism, which is really helpful when you start to wish your book had been part of the burning of Alexandria. So I'd recommend this book to anyone after they've completed a couple of drafts and they've got their structure pretty much down pat, because it's not that helpful unless you know the structure that you want to do and you've kind of got that sort of focused. I would give this one 3.5 stars. Next one is How Fiction Works by James Wood. Honestly, not an overly inspiring book. It's all back and forth, so the best way to get use out of this novel is to read it pretty much from start to finish in a very short time. It's not that long. so it is doable in like one session. The problem I found with it though was that the back and forth made it difficult to find specific writing advice. The thing is that when you read it, you kind of need to go through it, and as you're reading it, tag different pages that might be relevant to your writing, because if you don't, it's going to take you ages to go back and find, oh, when was the author talking about this? Oh, I can't remember. Whereas the other books kind of have all those contents and focus on different things. But a fair portion of this is mainly about the history of fiction as well, examples over time, and then in between that is advice, which I felt like the advice portion was much smaller than the portion that was focusing around how fiction has worked over time. So it's not so much a writing advice book as it is kind of like a summary of literally how fiction works. I would give this book about 2 out of 5. It has helpful elements, but they are like sparsely found between making every reference possible to the Iliad. I get it, you enjoy classics. Can we have something more relevant and modern though, is what I was feeling when I read it. Like, not everybody who becomes a writer epitomizes Homer as a role model. So the next book is The Art of Fiction by David Lodge. The Art of Fiction has a great contents page which enables you to find specific and relevant advice. For example, there is so much stuff that the other books don't cover, like magical realism, unreliable narrators, and futuristic writing for those people who are writing sci-fi. This has such a broad scope for advice, which I notice a lot of writing books just pretend like genre fiction doesn't exist, and that literary makes it a better book, which to me it doesn't, because I find literary fiction isn't my style and isn't what I'm trying to write. So I found this super helpful for me because I like to write fantasy and all that sort of stuff. And for example, and have they read Six of Crows? Like, anyway. Lodge even lists the authors he uses as examples in the contents next to the chapter, ranging from Virginia Woolf to Hemingway to like just so many. So actually, you can't even see that because I'm dumbass. Okay, Salinger, Jane Austen. There's just so many. The book gives definition to a lot of writing strategies that are often just accepted as a part of the craft but not discussed in specificity. Is that specific?
Fuck. Specificity.
I loved that I could learn literary terms like stream of consciousness, defamiliarization, and creating a sense of the past and a sense of place in organic ways, which provided author-led examples. However, the examples are a little bit dated for me, which is fine because they are still like really effective, and a classic is a classic is a classic is a classic. However, the examples, I think that it's fair to say that fiction changes over time, and so does how we implement things like weather, dialogue, consciousness, particularly if you're writing a young adult book. But I would still give this book about 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, this next one is The Writing Experiment. This is called it's called The Writing Experiment, apparently. Strategies for Innovative Creative Writing. It is by Hazel Smith. She's a great writer. This is great if you're feeling stuck with your writing, like you know the structure, the basic things, but you're not getting out the words that you want to get out. Hazel has every strategy that you can think of to break that cycle. She uses language-based strategies like word association, so that you build from a certain phrase or something that breaks out of cliche and generalization into specific and relevant to your writing voice. For example, one of the strategies that she uses, it might be like starting with a simple phrase and building on verbs or adjectives or adverbs around it until you've gone from a cliched saying to a fiercely independent piece of imagery. It took me so long to write that. She also focuses on experimental writing and writing without structure. So if you are a non-linear writer or a writer who wishes to break apart generally accepted narrative structure, then Hazelwood is for you. I would give her 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't a book which appealed to me. Like, I feel like it could be a 5 out of 5 for most people, but it just didn't appeal to me because I'm already a structured writer. So I like linear storytelling and I like reading linear stories. I do mind the occasional non-linear. I just like linear things. It's just stemming from one of my most prominent personality traits, which is that I'm a basic bitch. Okay, the next one is Making Shapely Fiction by Jerome Stern. This book works in a similar way to Roy Peter Clarke's 50 Strategies in that the contents page is so specific that you can skip a page to find the relevant information without reading everything else and getting bogged down. He does go into detail around topics which aren't always the focus in writing books, which I said in the last one, but this is relevant in this one, like anti-heroes, zigzagging characters out of situations that are difficult to write them out of. What else? Like fairy tale adaptations, if that's something that you're interested in perhaps writing, profanity and obscenity and how you can do it effectively without putting off your audience. And the sex. This is another book which goes from the general to specific, like Icebergs, which is basically writing arguments where characters do not express their real opinions, and omission in what they say is more important than what they do actually say. At the end of each chapter, there are like relevant other chapters mentioned that you may want to also read. There's like little links to, like, they'll just say, now that you've read this, you should read this, because they are relevant and they link together, which I thought was really helpful because it means that you can skip like 10 chapters and just continue on like the thread that you were going on. And you may not even read this book in a linear way because you may want to read like this chapter, but you might end up getting to every chapter in the end, which is also, you know, great. So it's like little links, so you're not reading 100 pages until you find something else that is relevant. It's a pretty easy read, I have to admit. It's not like it's going to take you ages to conceptualize it, which I find that in lots of writing advice books, they write in such a way that is so complicated that you're just trying to figure out what is it do you mean. Say it so that as if I was an idiot, because... Next one. This is my favorite of all the writing books that I own. It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, How to Edit Yourself into Print. It's by Rennie Brown and Dave King. I left this book for last because it was the most valuable to me personally. As you can see, I've kind of like got notes all through it, and it has like highlighted stuff all through it, which I never do. I never actually highlight in my books or write in my books, but I did in this one, because I was feeling like a monster that day. This was the first writing book that I ever read, and it taught me so many things that were only said as throwaway advice, like show don't tell. And I was like, okay, show don't tell. She threw the stones and punched the wall. That'll be a subtle way of showing that she's angry, right? Well, this book actually shows you relevant examples, which are way more modern than the other books, and at the end of every chapter there are exercises for you to do, and they summarize the chapter in dot points. So if y'all are lazy like me, you can read those for the chapter that isn't really relevant for you. There are also answers at the back of the book for the exercises, and a huge index for you when you want to find a particular writing buzzword that are mentioned in detail. Before I read this book, I literally thought changing speech attributions was effective because Harry Potter is honestly full of them, and that was like one of my favorite series of all time, especially growing up. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. There would be sentences that were literally like this. "I'm not mad," screamed Harry angrily, as he twisted his wand angrily into the air with rage angrily. I mean, I love Harry Potter, but you can also just say Harry said, or said Harry. To use verbs or speaker attributions, according to this book, is to brand yourself as kind of an amateur writer. I don't necessarily agree, but I can see why the advice is there, because most authors will tell you like that you should just use said, and if you want to change that later on, you can. There's also other advice in there, like about speaker attributions. They don't just say like it's for amateurs and just leave it at that. If they ever make a statement, they usually back it up with reasons why. Like they say that you have to think when you're writing a little bit realistically, like people don't chuckle sentences. When they said that, I really didn't expect Brown and King to come for rolling so hard, but they did. Like this book really helped me to undo heaps of mistakes I learned that when I was reading as a child that I thought was good writing, but it's not that it's bad writing, but it's just that when you're reading books that are middle grade or aimed at children, they kind of purposefully make it easier to understand, obviously. I give it 5 out of 5 stars, but I am extremely biased. I also read a Stephen King book on writing, but I can't find it, and honestly, it wasn't as good as many of the others. Each and every one of the books helped me in a different way, each contributing to the awful writer that I am today. And honestly, without them, I couldn't have done this video, which was a very, very clear example of procrastinating when I should have been writing, which is a classic writer strategy for feeling like you're achieving something when you're actually achieving nothing.